I know a lot of you hate grammar, especially when it comes to diagramming sentences. We're not going to do a full diagram of a sentence, but you do have to know what the subject and the verb are because it makes a difference more often than you would think in correcting some sentences. You probably use the wrong verb more than you realize. So this lecture is to help you recognize when to use certain verbs without some errors. I know some of you are rolling your eyes thinking this is a really easy subject. And really, you're not wrong. The basic is this. I give, not I gives. We were, not we was. It is, not it are. They have, not they has. You know those things. They're easy. But there are some things that are a little harder. In fact, there are 8 times that are not as easy. This is the list of circumstances that we're going to go through to help you realize when you need to use one verb over another in a particular kind of sentence. Sometimes when there are words between the subject and the verb, for example, if there's a prepositional phrase between the two, students have a hard time picking out the subject and verbs, especially the subject. The object of the preposition is never the subject of the sentence. Here's some examples. The samples on the tray in the lab need or needs testing. Now, on the tray is a prepositional phrase. Therefore, tray cannot be the subject. In the lab is a prepositional phrase, so lab is not the subject of the sentence. The subject is the samples. You can scratch out prepositional phrases. They mean nothing. So this sentence really says the samples need or needs testing. So the samples need testing. The samples on the tray in the lab need testing. High levels of air pollution damage or damages the respiratory tract. Of air pollution is a prepositional phrase, so it doesn't matter. The subject of the sentence is levels. High levels damage the respiratory tract. And the last one, the slaughter of pandas for their pelts have or has caused the panda population to decline drastically. Of pandas is a prepositional phrase. For their pelts is a prepositional phrase. So what we're really looking at is the slaughter, have or has. The slaughter has caused, so the slaughter of pandas for their pelts has caused the panda population to decline drastically. And connects, while the words or and nor separate. So in other words, if you have 2 subjects combined with the word and, you could replace them with the word they. If you have the words or nor, you only look at the subject that's closest to the verb. Let's look at some examples. Bleach and ammonia create or creates a toxic gas when mixed. Remember, we can substitute the 2 subjects with the word they create, or they creates. You know that they create, so bleach and ammonia create a toxic gas when mixed. Another example, if an infant or child is or are having difficulty breathing, seek medical attention immediately. If an infant or child is the whole subject, but we only look at the one closest. We do not combine them. So child is or child are. We would want is. So if an infant or child is having difficulty breathing. And the last example here, neither the lab assistant nor the students was or were able to download the program. Assistant and students are both the subjects of the sentence, but we used nor. So we only look at the one closest to the verb, which is students. Students were. So neither the lab assistant nor the students were able to download the program. The words each, one, body, and thing tend to confuse a lot of people. Because if you have everybody, that sounds like a lot of people, right? But because it ends in the word body, it is singular, or in other words, it refers to only one. So even if it's everyone, or no one, or someone, it's only one. So you could consider replacing the word everybody with it or he or she to help yourself. Look at some examples. Nobody who participated in the taste test was or were paid. Nobody is the subject. So is nobody singular or plural? Always singular. Nobody, let's replace it with he. He was paid. So the sentence should say, nobody who participated in the taste tests was paid. Take out all that center part, it'll just confuse you. Focus on the subject and make the verb agree with the subject. The next one, each of the essays has or have been graded. Each is the subject. Ignore the prepositional phrase, it'll only confuse you. Each, let's replace it with it. It has been graded. So the sentence would say, each of the essays has been graded. There are some nouns that refer to some kind of group. And while there's multiple parts or multiple people in that group, it's still just one group. They're called collective nouns. Words like jury, even though there's several people on a jury, it's just one jury. Same thing with committee or audience, crowd, class, family, couple. Even though there are multiple people involved, the unit itself is singular. An example, the Board of Trustees meet or meets in Denver twice a year. Ignore the prepositional phrase, it'll only throw you off. So the board is the subject. The board is singular. We could replace it with it. It meets in Denver twice a year. So the Board of Trustees meets in Denver twice a year. Sometimes sentences are tricky because we put the subject after the verb. We prefer to have the subject, then the verb. Sometimes we mix it up. For example, of particular concern is or are penicillin and tetracycline, antibiotics used to make animals more resistant to disease. Of particular concern is a prepositional phrase. That's nothing. So there is no subject before the verb. The verb comes after. The subject comes after. The penicillin and tetracycline are both the subjects. We've already talked about the word and. So penicillin and tetracycline would be combined, so it would be the same as they. And they would use are. So of particular concern are penicillin and tetracycline. Also, remember that the word there is not a subject. It's never a subject. It does not determine what verb you're going to use. So if you have a sentence that starts with there, the subject is going to come after the verb. So in the second example, there was or were a turtle and a snake in the tank. We know the subject is not there. The subject comes after. The subject is a turtle and a snake. We use the word and. We combine them into they. They were. So there were a turtle and a snake in the tank. Words like who, which, and that can be really confusing because they're often the subject of a dependent clause, but they can be singular or plural depending on their antecedent, or in other words, the word that it refers to. So some examples, take a train that arrive or arrives before 6 o'clock. The subject of the dependent clause is that, but what does it refer to? It really refers to train. So take a train arrives, so take a train that arrives before 6 o'clock. The next example, our ability to use language is one of the things that set or sets us apart from animals. The subject of the dependent clause is that, but its antecedent, or the word that it refers to, is things. Things set. So our ability to use language is one of the things that set us apart from animals. The last example is Carmen is the only one of my friends who lives in my building. The subject of the dependent clause is who actually refers to one. One lives. So Carmen is the only one of my friends who lives in my building. Now you know that sometimes we use S and sometimes we don't for plural words. Same thing goes for singular words, but we don't think about it enough to catch some mistakes. There's some words that are singular that end in S, so we treat them as though they're plural, but they're really not. Things like athletics, that's actually just referring to one program. Economics, mathematics, physics, politics, statistics, measles, news, those are all singular. But it can sound kind of weird because we don't usually treat them like they're singular. For example, politics is or are among my mother's favorite pastimes. Politics ends in S, so we want to treat it as though we could replace it with they, but that would be wrong. Politics is actually singular. We could replace it with it. It is, not it are, so politics is among my mother's favorite pastimes. Along those same lines as nouns that are singular but end in S, we also have company names that often end in an S, but they're actually singular. And sometimes we have words like vocabulary type words that end in S that need to be treated as singular. Here's some examples. Lost cities describes the discoveries of the last 50 ancient civilizations. Now, lost cities does have an S, but it's singular. It's one story. So lost cities, it describes. Lost cities describes the discoveries of the 50 ancient civilizations. Another one, Delmonico Brothers specializes in organic produce and addictive free meats. Delmonico Brothers ends in an S, but it's one company, not plural companies. So Delmonico Brothers could be replaced with it. It specializes in, so Delmonico Brothers specializes in organic produce and addictive free meats. And the last one, controlled substances. This is being used as basically a vocabulary word. So controlled substances, or it, is a euphemism for illegal drugs. Controlled substances is a euphemism for illegal drugs. So hopefully now you're a pro when it comes